Hegseth, who has good experience. He's had, combat deployments. He was highly decorated. That's useful, but it's not enough. So the real question is going to be, who does Trump put in there to help him out on these issues where he's not quite so strong?
What do you make of the controversies surrounding Trump's nomination for the Department of Defense?
Well, it's really on a couple of different levels. There's one just on the qualifications and can he do the job? And then the second, certainly the much bigger one in the American press, has been a lot of the issues surrounding his personal behavior over quite a number of years, because he's had issues apparently on Fox News with a lot of alcohol on the set. He's got lots of personal issues about sexual issues with some women, cheating on his wives, etc. So that's taken up a lot of the space in the United States here. But it appears, I think from some recent interviews I've seen, that the personal issues may be behind him. The question is how far behind is that enough? Is that enough to placate people? Because obviously he has to be confirmed by the Senate. And there are some Republican senators that are openly questioning whether or not they feel he's qualified for the job or can be the man that needs to be in that position. And so we'll see how it goes on that. But he does imply and provide some evidence that he has made some significant personal changes, and that's no longer an issue. But I think the issues on his actual military qualifications for that job are probably going to come under more scrutiny. Once people kind of get resolved on the personnel issues, then the next thing they'll look at is these actual qualifications. And look, his one of the things Trump values more than anything else is loyalty, and I think that he probably scores quite high on that category. But you got to have more than loyalty to do this particular job. I mean, if this was like a personal assistant to the president or an advisor, even on critical matters, it might be one thing. But he has to lead the Department of Defense. This massive bureaucratic organization, and then, of course, all of the branches of the military all under that. And the Secretary of Defense has to do a lot more than just make decisions. You have to provide what is the direction that the Department of Defense is going to go on. Is the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, the Space Force, et cetera, are they organized properly? Do they need to be reformed? Do they need to be elevated? What is the level of combat readiness of each of them, and how would we go about doing that? How much money needs to be accounted for that? All these kinds of things, lots of things like that, and you have to manage that huge organization and give the drive for the vision leadership. That's what's required of this. So it's a whole lot more than just managing the department, as hard as that would be. And it's just unclear that Hegseth by himself has that kind of experience, because he didn't even serve in the Pentagon while he was on active duty. So he doesn't, have any personal knowledge of those things in the last number of years. It's just been as a TV personality. And that doesn't really qualify you to handle these big things. So what I think that probably Trump will do, and I haven't seen this pick yet, is probably make sure that he has, a really strong Deputy Secretary of Defense, they call him DepSecDef, or other key leaders around him that do have this experience operating large organizations, whether it's, like the current Secretary of Defense who, was the head of, was a 4-star general, was a 2-star general at various places. And so he's operated these big levels. So he's had some experience with that. Whereas Hegseth, who has he's got good experience. He's had, combat deployments. He was highly decorated, a Bronze Star Medal for Valor. But that's useful, but it's not enough. So the real question is going to be, who does Trump put in there to help him out on these issues where he's not quite so strong?
What do you make of the argument that there should be an outsider appointed to the DOD? As you say, the current leadership, he's a 4-star general, but then if you look at the record of the DOD of the last 4 years, we saw that debacle in Afghanistan. And, people on the Trump side would argue that for 20 years, the Department of Defense has been poorly run, and we've been in forever wars, and there's been lots of spending on the military-industrial complex, and people are asking, what has been the results of that? So isn't it important to actually have an outsider try and shake up the DOD?
Well, I mean, it's not so much an outsider; it's someone who's qualified, and I am of the agreement of those concerns that the Department of Defense has been poorly run for the last couple of decades. I think that there's been a lot of managers, people who've just kind of managed the process, and they've just basically let things go on inertia. Nobody has been trying to make anybody do anything different. I mean, you talk about the way the Afghan war was brought to an end. The Biden administration deserves a lot of blame for how that was conducted, but all the administrations prior to that also carry burden and responsibility for how it was allowed to get to that point. The fact that it wasn't brought to an end earlier, even at the end of the Trump administration, where he initially made the decision to completely withdraw from Afghanistan before he left office. I think it was supposed to, the original order he signed late in his term was that it was supposed to be completed by the 16th of January of 2021. But then he allowed the inertia of the building and some of his advisors to talk him out of it. And so that was part of what the Pentagon did. They want things to kind of stay the same. And that's one of the big problems that Hegseth will have coming in himself, is that the building doesn't want to change. They probably want him to just kind of stay over in the office and look pretty. And, I would imagine these conversations going on, let him have the appearance of being in charge, but really we're going to run the thing. And there's going to be a lot of difficulty for anyone to come in there because that will be the case no matter who Trump puts in there, because they like things to just stay the same. What we need is, whether it's outside or inside, we need somebody as the Secretary of Defense to come in and say, all right, the way we've been doing things, forget it. We're not going to do it. If I need to come in and fire a bunch of 3- and 4-star generals, pack your bags, get out of here, because I'm going to elevate people in the key positions, because we are going to make some changes in the Department of Defense, and we're going to make sure that we actually have a strong fighting force. And there's a lot of changes that need to happen, because the way things have been going have been pretty bad there. And I don't want to find out how bad by getting us into a war somewhere where it's exposed. It's much better to try to preempt this stuff by not getting in any more wars and then doing some significant reform that's needed to bring us up to speed.
It's funny, some of these allegations about Hegseth are, you mentioned, for example, he drinks too much. Old colleagues at Fox News apparently said that he drinks too much, and therefore this disqualifies him. And yet, as you say, people aren't held accountable for serious issues in Afghanistan. Which generals were fired for that? So do you think there really needs to be a lot more accountability directed towards the leadership of the DoD? And, who do you think would be your kind of ideal candidate to do that?
Yeah, 100%. There definitely needs to be accountability. I mean, Trump has said that during the campaign that he would bring some accountability, and he specifically said about the Afghan situation. A lot of other commentators in the Americas said, oh my gosh, he's going to politicize the military, which is laughable on the surface because the military is incredibly politicized already. But that's such an outlier thought to actually hold someone accountable. I mean, for crying out loud, I mean, all these generals that were in charge, I mean, the architects of this Afghan problem, even after I came out in 2012 and told everybody graphically that the senior leaders were lying to the American people. We were not winning the war. These things they said were improving weren't. They were getting worse. And if we didn't make changes, we would lose the war. Then in 2018, the Washington Post came in and completely corroborated all that by saying the Afghanistan papers, that they even expanded beyond what I had said about how much lying had been going on. And yet, no one was ever held to account. I mean, these guys, David Petraeus being one of the worst of all of them, was talked about in both the Afghanistan papers and in my experience, because I was deployed under him during the 2010-2011 surge. And yet this guy who was responsible for all this stuff to this day, he still keeps going on these major networks. They still keep putting a microphone on his face. They keep listening to him. They actually went to him after the disaster in August of 2021 when the war ended, actually asking him what went wrong, and he's one of the primary reasons for that. So people need to be held accountable, and the guys who were in charge of that don't need to be promoted 3- and 4-star generals. They need to be shown the door on their way out and elevate people who can get the job done. So I'm in strong agreement with that. And to your last question about who would be best, there's always the issues. Things are political, and you can't get around that. a lot of the positions. I think both the Secretary of the Army and the Secretary of the Navy have both been designated as somebody who's a big campaign supporter and whatever, and that happens a lot in Washington. But what we really need is just somebody who has the skills. And I'll just say, full disclosure, I fought for Doug McGregor in the Desert Storm in 1991, and we've been friends ever since there. So I'm not completely unbiased here, but one of the reasons we've stayed friends is because he is absolutely, hands down, the best person, or somebody just like him, that we need, because he doesn't care about the status quo. He doesn't care about what hurting anybody's feelings. He cares everything about effectiveness. And he wrote back in 1997, a book called Breaking the Phalanx, and he's been several others since, about how the DoD needs to be reformed. In that 1997 book, he talked about the future of warfare and what we need to be getting ready for now so that we're capable when the changes come. And many of those things are exactly what we're seeing playing out in the Russia-Ukraine war in terms of missiles, coordinated strikes with indirect fire with other kinds of sensors, et cetera. He foresaw all of that. We made none of those changes, and now Russia, under force, and even Ukraine to some example, are being forced into making those changes. But we need somebody who's not doing it after the fact, but can do it before. Doug knows how to make all those changes. He knows what needs to be changed, et cetera. And that would be the best pick for Donald Trump, because he's somebody who knows how to get it done. And but he's not that well connected, so I doubt that he'll get it, even though he did work for Trump a little bit toward the end of his first term. But I would like to see him back in there again.
And just finally, some people have speculated that if Hegseth doesn't get the position, it could be Ron DeSantis. Can you comment on that, whether that would be a good appointment? And do you think the military, do you think it's time to kind of de-woke the military? Do you think Trump is going to do that?
Yeah, I think that on the DeSantis, listen, this is nothing against Pete Hegseth. I was on Fox News with him several times while he was there. From the stuff I've seen him say, I agree with some of his ideas and concepts. It's just my issue is that he just doesn't have the experience to be able to put that into a play in such a massive issue like that. For DeSantis, he also has some military experience at all, but he also has, executive experience, being the governor of Florida. So I think in those terms, he would probably be better positioned to be able to succeed. Whether he would take the job or not is a separate issue. There's a lot of pros and cons to that from his perspective here. But I think that if Hegseth doesn't pass, or if he withdraws his nomination, et cetera, then I think that probably DeSantis would be slightly a better choice for that, but that remains to be seen. In terms of the wokeness stuff, look, there's a whole lot of things that need to be changed here, and a lot of the mentality. We need to be focused sharply not on whether we do or don't do DEI kind of things. We need to be sharply focused on what will make the force the most combat effective it can be. That should predominate over any other discussions. And if someone's trying to elevate this DEI stuff to subordinate readiness because they lack something, no, we shouldn't be doing that. But we also don't need to go in the opposite direction just for the sake of, getting rid of it if that doesn't help the force. Bottom line, what's going to make us combat effective?
Thank you for watching this video. If you want to watch more content, please subscribe to our new GBN America YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.